if you're all at this event, and you're talking to this person, these guests are reaching out to people in enough time, like I'm sure they can find 30 minutes to come over and talk to you, even 20, you know, and if you have like a little quick outline, maybe you just end up having a montage. Maybe you just go and like, listen, we're just going to ask these people that we can get these 3 main questions, try to dive in. You probably come back with some cool, good content you can post out.
This is On Camera, On Brand, a show for professionals who want to look good on camera, but don't have the time or expertise to turn their office into a Hollywood studio. In each episode, Rob Ruscher uncovers how professionals can get the most from their home or office setups. If you invest the time to share your stories on camera, you should be on brand.
Everyone, welcome to another episode of On Camera, On Brand. We have a special episode, actually. I am joined by Tristan Pelligrino. He is the co-founder of Motion. He is the one that helped produce On Camera, On Brand and got it started. And I'm here to help him actually answer some of your most common questions related to, I guess, podcasts on the road when you're going to events, you're traveling, and you want to just take your podcast out of your office. So Tristan, welcome. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Rob. Appreciate it. Yeah, so I decided what I would do for this episode is bring a lot of these questions that we get from customers all the time, because quite honestly, most of the podcasts we produce are done remotely. So we use Riverside a lot. And I know you use Riverside as well to record some episodes, but a lot of customers ask us, like, if we're going to a big trade show and we have a lot of our, biggest customers there, we have a lot of prospects that we want to connect with, how can we set up an in-person studio essentially at the trade show, whether we have a dedicated room for it outside of the trade show booth, or maybe we build, our whole set around the podcast environment itself. And I think it's a great question, because a podcast is more than just this audio channel, right? You can kind of use it to fit into a lot of things that you're doing on the marketing side. So we haven't really had a dedicated effort to help our clients, figure this out. There isn't necessarily a plan that we put in place to help them. So what I thought we would do is kind of lean on your expertise today and go through a lot of the questions. So I just put down a list of questions that we get that I thought that we could go through, get some of your insights, and then, we could package it up and help some of the folks we work with.
Sounds good. Yeah. And I think it's beyond that. You are already at this location, let's say, whether that's a trade show, an event, you have people that most likely you want to talk to, and we can come back to this, but I've actually done it years ago at an NAB, a big trade show in Vegas. You got like 100,000 people there. We did a whole podcast like series while on the showroom floor. And what I found beyond, now I come home with like 10 episodes that I was able to use. I met so many people. People came and hung out at the booth, and the company was Tokina, a lens company. They got so many people in that booth just to hang out, just because they want to listen to the podcast. So like, I think there's a lot of hidden benefits to that, in addition to having the content when you come back home too.
Yeah, if you put a lot of planning in place, you can actually make that like the center point of everything that you're doing at a trade show. And everyone likes to be around the big scene that is established at the event. So if you can do it right and you can plan ahead, it's a good strategy to use. So you want to dive in to some of these?
Let's see what we got.
All right. So the first one here is, what are the key elements to consider when setting up a physical space for podcast recording? It's a pretty broad question, but what are your thoughts there?
I mean, I would say I always default to the first thing I focus on is sound, just because even if the video doesn't look good, you have like a crazy person waving their hands behind you. You can always put a graphic over that. You can always cut to B-roll, do whatever. But if your sound, you focus so much on the visual, but then you don't have the right microphones, maybe you were lazy and didn't want to bring these microphones, I'll just use the shotgun. Problem is, if I can't hear that and all I hear is that sound, that's a problem. So I would first focus on, how can I make this sound the best? And then in terms of the physical space, man, that is a tough question, because there's so much to it. I mean, if we cut to the wide shot here, if you're watching it, we're in a big space with like concrete floors. If we weren't using these microphones, I don't know how good it would sound because of the echo, and there's always this technique and tool, I feel like, happy middle place where you have the right tools and you're using the right technique to get the most out of them. And then additionally, when I'm looking at the space, if I know I'm going to be on the floor, let's say, it's going to be loud, there's just nothing you can do about it, I will want to make sure that my background shows what's going on. Like if we were just to look at a brick wall, let's say, but you hear all these people talking and you don't see it, it's really distracting. Where it's a little less distracting, it kind of goes along with the visuals. So I would focus first on making sure you're going to make it sound the best, which I know is like kind of a broad answer to the broad question, but I would just be focused on how can I make sure I come home with the best audio, and then I would layer in like the visuals and like the actual look of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Let me get your take on this. I think there are a couple directions you can go. Let's say you are going to an event, one of your industry's larger events. Let's say it's in Las Vegas. I mean, you and I have been to several of those together. Yeah. Let's say, you can go one route where you're building your podcast recording setup within your trade show booth or whatever. It's just similar to what you did at NAB at one time, where you kind of have your podcast recording studio set up there. And that's really the centerpiece of what you have going on at your booth. I think that is one angle you can take. And then the opposite is getting a dedicated environment. So maybe it's a hotel room, maybe it's an intimate environment like that, or maybe you have a small conference room that you rent out that's a dedicated space. And I think those two options kind of drive the equipment that you get and the setup that you use. Because like you said, if you're in this large environment, you have to have dedicated mics so that they, you pick up sound only from predominantly the speaker. Versus like, you don't have that dependency necessarily when you're in a more intimate environment. It's more quiet, like audio's less of an issue in that case. So I think where you go depends on what equipment you use.
And the room is a great thing. I know people, I haven't personally done that. I've been wanting to, but if you're able to even upgrade to a suite or slightly bigger room, I mean, you can use the window in the room and, set up a desk behind you. There's definitely ways to make a hotel room like work really well. And I feel like you would get better sound because maybe you get something in the hallway, but you don't have all the other stuff there.
Yeah. So next one for you. What's the best way to handle the technical aspects of in-person recording without disrupting the flow of the conversation?
You mean like if they have a problem once they start recording, or just handling miking and doing all that before the conversation starts?
I think the intention of this one is more about, once that conversation starts, like you want to minimize the disruption. Like, oh, hey, sorry, let me move that mic a little closer. Like you want to give them the freedom to just have a normal conversation.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that...
Yeah, for live stuff like that, and I'll even pull on experience from like corporate interviews. So maybe not the same thing. I figure podcasts, or I treat podcasts very similar to doing a video interview. So for me, I build that in, like when we sat down, we were talking about donuts, beer, it's like you do. And while we're doing that, I'm messing with my mic. I'm checking your stuff. I'm looking at cameras. So I kind of try to do that in the warm up, like most people don't just, hey, my guest is here, hit record, and you jump right in. Anyone that's recorded a podcast, there's always that awkward, okay, how do we transition, to start recording? And I found that I just go with it and I joke about how it's awkward. But during that like first 5 to 10 minutes, that's when I'm doing the tweaks. And then I really don't mess with it too much. Like, yes, the mic positioning is really important, and an inch here or there can change the sound, but I think it's more detrimental, and I've learned this from interviewing, to stop the conversation. Like, can I fix this in post? Sure. And if I can fix it in post, and then I just will. Like if it's just like a hiccup or something got bumped, versus stopping your flow. And then as the host, I'm just like, wait, where were we? What were we talking about? So I think for me, I'd rather stay in the flow in the conversation than deal with worrying about tech issues.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot that you can do before you hit the record button too, right? Like we were talking about, you kind of hit the record button, you get into a little bit of a flow before the actual podcast, starts or whatever. But there's a lot you can do with testing things out. In like before we even started this podcast recording, we were sitting in, we were, adjusting lights, adjusting camera, sound, you're doing all this testing before you hit recording. And I think a lot of folks make that mistake where it's like, all right, we're behind on time. We got to get rolling. Let's just sit down and do it. And then once that happens, your cameras are rolling. It's very hard to adjust at that point.
Yeah. And I would say, and this is not just to plug myself, but this is sometimes when you might want to, this is my show. Well, I guess I meant more in terms of sometimes this is when you might need that internal conversation. do we need to spend a few thousand extra dollars and hire a couple crew members, a couple video pros? And the reason I mean of that, or why I stress that, is, to do what we're doing, we have 3 cameras, 2 microphones, lights, hanging things, rigging. Luckily, I've been doing this for 15 years, so I can have a conversation with you and set up 3 cameras. If you're not used to setting up even 1 camera, and now you expect your team, go ahead and do it's going to be really hard. And what I found, especially going through my career, is you'll mess something up. If you try to do everything by yourself and you don't have this like workflow, you're going to, and we've done it even in the past, you don't hit the record button on the separate audio device. You forget this because you're thinking of so many things.
Yeah.
So I would say if you're looking at this, one, I would just do it the simplest way possible at first. Just get a camera on your guest and your host, get the microphones, and then you can kind of build out, because it does get pretty complicated quick when you're adding in all these layers.
Yeah, so that's a good segue to the next question. Let's break that down a little bit. If, let's say I do want a minimal setup, I do want something as simple as possible where I won't have a 3-4 person crew involved. What would you recommend in order to get like a one-on-one podcast recording done, let's say at the event itself? What would that look like?
Yeah, I'd say at a baseline, if you'd want a camera on each person, and I don't think I would really mess with the iPhone. So we have cameras that have XLR input. So we're using the podcast mics you use and plug into Riverside. But since we have cameras that have XLR, we can use the same mic. So we don't really have to worry about that. You know how it sounds. And if you're the host or your team is the one doing the podcast, you're probably familiar with that gear. So yeah, at a minimum, I'd say you need 2 cameras, 2 microphones, and maybe 1 light, depending on the location. Maybe there's a window. And there's also, I've seen ones that I've watched and been entertained with where it's just a camera person, and then you have your host with like a news microphone, and they're on the floor and they're, hey, tell me, it's these 5 to 6 minute quick convos. So that could be an option too. If you're really, I would say that's the most streamlined. I would say the most streamlined is kind of go for that newscast feel where you're holding a mic, you're on the floor, you're not renting a location, you're not adding lights, and you just have a wired in mic and I'm talking and I hand it to you. At least you have that audio. I think you can definitely cut that up. And then the next phase would be to find a way to sit down or a location, and then you add that second camera so we can, mimic what you're already doing on Riverside or wherever you're recording your podcast.
Yeah, so you talked a lot about microphones and how that's a big piece of the podcasting, really recording effort. So what's the best way to position a microphone if you are at an event in order to get the best audio that you can? Considering that there are going to be a lot of things going on, but what are some things that you can do to at least make it as good as possible? Yeah.
And, first I'll say, I'll go through the gear, because I'd say there's like 3 main microphones that people doing podcasts or going to live events, they would run into. But I also want to stress that there's places like lensrentals.com, Lens Pro to Go. If you have an event in 2 weeks, they will FedEx all the gear you want right to your doorstep with a label. You go do the event, you can even ship that gear from the event. We've done it where we've had gear get shipped to the hotel or a FedEx location. So I just want to preface that I'm going to talk about some stuff, but it doesn't mean you need to go out and buy everything, especially if you're not doing it yet. Just know there's ways that you can spend less money to try it out. You don't need to invest thousands of dollars. So your 3 main microphones, I would say the wireless lav might be a really great option for you at a trade show, and those are, anyone that doesn't know, it's just this little microphone. It's called a lavalier mic. That's what they call wireless lav for short. It clips onto your shirt here, and you can wire it into your back pocket, and then there's a receiver that connects to your camera. So the nice thing about that, you have 2 benefits from that. I can move freely, and if you're listening to this, if I turn an inch, I sound way different than I'm sounding right now.
Yeah.
With the wireless lav, I can turn to my guest, whoever I'm talking to, and since the microphone is right on your chest, you're not picking up so much around you noise-wise. It's really just capturing what's happening these couple feet in front of you. So again, super loud environment. It's not like you won't hear it, but that's a great option. The problem is, I guess they're cheaper now. I think you can get like Rode ones for $200. I'll skip the pricing later, but the good lavs are like $700 and up to get a lav that would last forever. So that could be a great rental for an event, especially if you don't think you'll use it otherwise. The second option is a shotgun microphone, a boom mic we call it in the industry. And basically it's similar to these microphones, but they have a like skinnier pickup pattern, like a cardioid or hypercardioid. And what that allows you to do is you'll see it in the movies or behind the scenes where, someone's like holding this big pole with the microphone out. So that microphone at the end is designed to actually be a couple feet away and still get that good sound. And it's really going to pinpoint. However, the downside to that is it takes a little bit of technical skill to know how to position it. Because again, you go a few inches too far and you're going to pick up the conversation behind you.
And you need an operator for that too. So that's another.
Yeah, you can always put the boom pole over if you're locked off. But again, I mean, I go back to these microphones, these dynamic broadcast microphones that we're using here. And beyond that, I would say, and we've actually talked about this last night. We were sitting out having dinner, and on TV and everything, all these sportcast shows and all these different shows, they have the mics in the shot now, like news stuff. So to me, when people ask like, oh, I don't want the mic in the shot or not, I'm like, well, just focus on what's more important. Do you want that high quality sound for your content, or do you not want to have any microphones in front of you? So I would say, honestly, something like what we're using here and making that work. And then my next option would be a wireless lav. That's probably the route I would go.
Yeah, I think the lav's a good suggestion, because I think if you're interviewing folks that aren't used to like speaking on camera and with a microphone in front of them, you do get some of the, where they're kind of all over the place. So it depends too. With the lav mic, it's basically like you can be yourself and kind of.
You forget it's there.
Yeah, we're just having a conversation, and it's a little smaller footprint, obviously. I mean, this is a big apparatus, right? And it is a little bit more intimidating. So it's a good suggestion. I mean, I don't use the lav much, in that case, but I think, it's a good thought.
Yeah, and if your team is someone that is going to different events and trying it, that's something I would say is worth investing in, because something like a wireless lav, it's not just going to work there at the trade show. It's, if you want to do a software demo, if you want to be a little more interactive on camera, maybe you have a shot and you're actually doing a physical whiteboard. I have to twist my whole body right now to still talk, where the lav, you could feel more like a teacher. And I think that's a really cool like vibe, a different style to look into also.
Yeah, and I think the Lens Pro to Go options or whatever, it's a good route to take. You can
test it out.
Yeah, test these things out. You haven't committed thousands of dollars. You're literally paying like $100 to $200 to rent this thing for a couple days.
Yeah, and not even. I mean, some you'd be surprised. Like their 7-day rental prices, you actually get a better deal if you rent it longer per day. So if you're at a week-long event, you might see that price tag and you're like, oh, that's kind of a bit. But then it's like, that's like 5 days you can be making content with this rented item. So
yeah, I like that. So we've talked about the environment. So, the space that you're in. We've talked about audio. So let's switch to lighting, which you touched on in the beginning, but I feel like lighting might be the biggest thing that is neglected.
Yeah.
When you're recording shows. So what would you suggest if you're in an environment?
Yeah, I hope this comes out the right way. I think lighting gets neglected because there's so many people that don't know how to do it. And it's lighting is one of those things. I mean, I've been doing this for 15 years, and it's one of those things where the longer I'm in the field, I feel like the less I know. Because as I'm learning more and you get in so many different environments, there is so many tricks, and then you think you know how to do stuff, you see someone else do it, and you're like, oh man, how do you do that? So for me, lighting is just this constant, that's like the infinity path. Like I'll never get to where I want, as a lighting director, but I enjoy chasing it. So in terms of like how people listening to this could grasp something from lighting, I would say, again, a Lens Pro to Go lens rental, so you can rent, because lights get really expensive. If you're on a trade show, or if the camera has to be far away, your little LED panels that go on your camera aren't really going to do much, and you're dealing with a lot of overheads if you're on the floor. But we can even take it to a hotel room, maybe, if we're saying we're going to do like a podcast in there, just to keep it simple, and maybe we can break out examples. Because I think the hard part is like, it's a spider web, and there's not one way to always light. There's basic rules and whatever. So in terms of like an actionable advice I can try to give with lighting is big soft boxes. So lights that have like a big, it looks like a white piece that's like a grid of material that's soft. So the way to think of it is, the bigger, not the light, I'm talking about what goes in front of the light to soften it. The bigger that softbox is, the softer your shadows will be. And in terms of interviewing, the easier your job's going to be. So like if I were to when I do a bigger interview and we have hours to set up, I bring in the biggest lights I can. and I bounce them into like a 6 foot or 8 foot like white fabric. And then that goes through another 6 foot or 8 foot like grid, almost like a shower curtain, a frosted thing. And what that allows you to do is like, no matter where your talent moves or if they sit differently or you guys move around, it's not going to change the lighting because you're bringing in that like soft sunlight. So for me, what I would look at is, there's a brand named Aperture. They have like a 150, a 350. They have different light sizes, but getting something like that with a softbox is going to get you in a really good spot. And I kind of hesitate. I hope I don't sound like I'm too fumbling, because when you're asking me this question, I'm thinking of all the times I've walked into a situation and been like, oh man, because you don't know, like, oh, we're going to do this window. This is great. They send you pictures. Then what happens? There's a dump truck out there for 4 hours and now I can't use the window, or it's storming. So it's almost like, for me, I have so many different tools and tricks. Sometimes it's hard to teach those because it's like I have to be in the environment and think of it. So maybe there's another way to.
I've noticed with you is like, you do pull in all these experiences, right? So, because there are so many variables that are involved with lighting, I feel like until you've encountered an issue or a challenge like a dump truck outside of a window, you don't really know what to do until you're in that situation. Yeah. So that is an advantage that you have when you go on set. It's like, let me figure out, where are my light sources? How am I going to work within this room the best way I can? And you're pulling in like all these past experiences. Yeah,
and I'm glad you said that. And we'll dive one last thing I'll say on the lighting, because there is that I have developed like over the years the same process, and that just clicked in my head. But the first thing I do is I learned this from an amazing cinematographer who shoots movies, and he kind of just drilled it in my head, where he does, no matter what movie he's shooting, what scene, the first thing he always does is he puts the camera down on a tripod, it turns off all the lights. So the first thing I always do is turn off all the overhead lights. They never make anyone look great. I'll just say that. So turn off all the lights, take your camera and just look around. Like, what would be the easiest place to film and like what already looks good? And that could be like, what's in the background? Is there a window here? I don't really have to light. So I joke that like sometimes I feel like I'm just lazy, but I'm usually looking for the easiest way to execute. It's just like, why fight it? Why bring in more gear when like there's a window here? So yeah, the first thing I do is I just take my camera and I look around the room with the lights off, and then we begin layering it in, and then I set it up and I'm like, okay, this is where I'll sit. And then I start with my first light, you just kind of layer it in. That's almost like the first stroke of a painting. You put your first light and then see, should I change it? And then before you know it, it's just, you're kind of just doing these small little steps until you create the final image. So maybe that helps more. But again, it is a confusing process. It's sometimes hard to break down for every scenario, I guess.
Yeah, and I feel like, the instinct for a lot of people that aren't used to working with light is, let's just get an LED and just splash someone with the light, and then that's when you get all those harsh shadows, you get like bright spots, and it's really hard to work with.
And you're like fighting the environment, because if I see so many people that they will start putting lights up and they don't even have like a picture up or a camera going, and it's like, well, sure, that might be right, but wouldn't it be easier to just like see it, and know? And there's a lot of times, I mean, even this example, we had the idea like, oh, there's a cool brick wall in this glass, let's shoot this direction. But then just by us moving the camera, like, this way looks better. You get all the depth and cool. But we just started throwing lights up. We would have invested an hour into this setup and trying to dig us out to make it look better, when really we could have just seen this spot, before even putting a light up.
That gave us more time to spend at happy hour, which was good.
Definitely.
Which I advise fitting that in for all your events.
You need it.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the guest experience. So we went down the environment, we got all the audio equipment in place, the lighting, but now, we've created a larger footprint probably for our guests. So how have you found that the best hosts, in the work that you've done, make the guest feel as normal as possible, given all the equipment that they're under?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I just try to ignore it. And like, I don't draw attention to it. And whenever, usually get the, oh, that's a bright light, or man, look at all this stuff. Like, I still love what I do. So I just like enjoy those conversations. And I think I'm able to bring, for me personally, I just bring a little bit of my passion. So sure, maybe you're not passionate about all the video stuff, but hopefully you're passionate about the podcast. So I'm sure there's a way, if someone's feeling a little nervous, you could be like, I just always try to like talk about the gear, bring up something, be like, yeah, no, that light was there. I've had it, maybe there's a story of it. We have a motion control, which is kind of a fun thing. So I just try to talk about the equipment, and before you know it, you're not even looking at it anymore. We're just talking. Yeah. Maybe I roll without you knowing, which is one of my favorite things, is just to roll right away. Even if you don't think you're going to use it. But there's been a lot of podcasts I've listened to where you hear the guests like sitting in, especially if it's like a celebrity. And I always love those because you feel like you get that inside look. So for me, I just start recording and I just talk to you, and then you can almost sense it. Like once you're settled in, you see them kind of relax a little bit. Then it's like, all right, should we hop into this? Should we start jumping in? Yeah. So I try to just let them ask the questions about it, but it's not like I'm trying to hide it. I try to like be like, yeah, no, this is all here. It's for you. We got this set up. We started with just one camera, and now we're able to do multiple cameras, and and hopefully your guest has seen your podcast and seen the outputs, because I think that helps sell it,
and
they
know what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
At the end of the day,
and that's what's so great working with you guys is like when I record a podcast and, a couple weeks or whatever later, I get a Google Drive, and it's like, not only do I have like a couple clip, or I guess 4 video clips, there's 2 shorts, I can give that to the guests too. It's like, hey, if you want to post this on, here's some stuff. And I think there's like, when people see that, they start showing up a little more for your show. When they're like, oh, this guy, Rob, it's not like we're just going to talk and maybe in a couple months, there'll be a Spotify episode. It's like, oh no, we're going to get on Rob's show or on one of Motions Network shows. I'm going to have like 6 assets to like post across my social channels or to put on my website.
Yeah.
So I think there's something to that too. I think people will want to put a little bit more effort into your episodes.
Yeah, and I think that goes, if we're talking about guests, making the guests comfortable, I think the preparation leading into the interview is a big piece of what you're talking about. Because, if you want to feature someone on your show at a live event, it's like, let's share some information beforehand. Let's let them know what the output is going to look like. And so when they do spend 30 to 45 minutes with you, they know you're going to take some care with the content, and it's going to lead to something, at the end of the day. So I think that's a big piece too. It happens even before you hit the record button, and then they sit in the chair. It's like they're almost more comfortable. They understand what to expect when they sit down. And I do like recording before the person even know that it's recording, because I think that's like a very small thing that you can do that has a big impact. And it works with podcasts, and it also works if you're doing like a documentary style interview. It's like, it's like, let's chat a little bit beforehand, sit down, let's get the frame right with you, adjust tripods and everything. But you just might be recording the whole time. And you're having a conversation, you're warming them up a little bit. And then when you're like, oh, we've been recording for the last 5 minutes, then they feel like they're already settled in, and then you can kind of roll forward.
Totally. It's like, okay, well, we've already been recording, so I guess we're in it at this point. Yeah. And I think I learned that technique actually from filming. There's a word for it. It's called 50-50. So if you're on set and you hear the crew saying 50-50, it means you're going to record without telling anyone. And I've done this for commercials where, if it's like a mom-daughter and that is what we're filming, but we're not filming now, but there's a cute little moment, I'll go over there and record. If it's a documentary, especially, always record, because you never know. Sometimes, and we've been in those scenarios, it's like they said the best lines and the most impactful stuff when they were just BSing in the beginning, you know? And I love it, your original question about preparing. I guess I was thinking more on the day, but you're right, like leading up to it, having a little conversation. What I've been doing actually, just because it's easy for me, is I just send a video note. I'll send, after I've reached out, sometimes it'll be a video to reach out and say, hey, it's Rob. Just so, and I feel like you're seeing me. Like, this is what you're going to get on the show. Like, this is what my setup looks like. This is the quality I bring. And I find that helps too. And like a week out, just kind of, you could send an email. That's fine. I just find it's a little more personal. Be like, hey, Tristan, how's it going, man? I know we got our episode next week. If there's anything I can do for you, let me know. Here are like 3 topics I'm hoping to hit, and looking forward to it. And that's it. It takes me less time to do that sometimes than to send the email. And I find it's a lot more personal. And then they get to know you a little bit more even before the show. Well,
I love that you do that even on your outreach to get the best guests for your show. It's like, here's a video I recorded just for you. Mm-hmm. A lot of people talk about, how can I get better guests, or how can I get the right guests for my show? Well, it's like you do have to invest some time into that. You actually record videos to get that to happen.
Yeah.
I think you should do an episode all around that, like what your approach is for that.
Well, and that's even something that it kind of developed by some of the clients I've been working with and helping them to amp their setup or get their podcast set up at home. What was blatantly obvious is everyone that I've talked to needs a way to, I want to hit record, do my video, get that content. But then without taking time, I want to swivel my chair and get right back to work, do the next thing.
Yeah.
So now that I have that set up for myself too, I can see the power because, I mean, I'm not joking. It takes less time for me to record a video and send you a message than for me to, all right, how do I eat? And I'm not a strong writer, you know, I'm just leaning into my strengths, but it's like I could spend 30 minutes on ChatGPT to craft the perfect email, or I can just give you an authentic welcome message, you know, that I'm genuinely excited to have you on the show.
Yeah. I love that approach. All right. So last question for you. And this is kind of to put a bow on everything, but when is it a good time to record an in-person podcast versus remote? Like, when would that be the right fit, do you think?
I think as soon as you can. It's, you know, anyone I've talked to that is creating consistent content, especially that has a podcast show. I mean, and you probably hear this a lot. Should have started this sooner. Oh man, we should have started when we were in Vegas at that event and just got stuff, because the truth is your first couple episodes probably aren't going to be great, and that's okay. But you just have to get through that. So I think if you're looking at an event, you know, whether you have the budget or not, there's ways to just go with like a single camera and microphone like we discussed. And even if it's just you yourself, you know, there's plenty of great content I've seen from trade shows where it's just one person. Hey, I'm Rob, and we're here on the floor. We're going to go check, and then they go talk to the booths, you know, and do little things. So, I mean, how much would that be to rent? Probably not that much. You're not talking thousands of dollars to rent, you know, a camera and microphone. So I would say as soon as you feel like you have content that you can record, you figured out an outline, and of course you probably can talk more of the structure and the importance, but do you feel like in the beginning sometimes it's just like, just do something, right? Just record something, delete it if you need to, but you learn so much from doing it.
You can throw it away. I think that does help people. For some folks, they really need to be prepared. They're not even comfortable hitting record. But then for others, it's like, I just want to jump in and just see. I want to make some mistakes, and then I want to figure out the process from there. So I think it's, you know, different people take different routes to get there.
Yeah.
And I think they all can work. And kind of to some of your points, I think it is valuable to do in-person recording. I don't think it's better than remote per se, but I think it's different.
It adds something. It gives you a little extra. I mean, even this, just seeing the environment, you know, we're in a different space. I think that's fun. And it's almost easier to get, it's very hard. Everyone has different schedules, different time zones. Can I line up with this person interview? But if you're all at this event, you know, and you're talking to this person, you know, these guests are reaching out to people in enough time, like I'm sure they can find 30 minutes to come over and talk to you, even 20, you know, and if you have like a little quick outline, maybe you just end up having a montage, you know, maybe you just go and like, listen, we're just going to ask these people that we can get these 3 main questions, try to dive in, probably come back with some cool, good content you can post out. Yeah.
And hopefully, you know, after talking this through a little bit, we'll see some more of our clients try to do more in-person recordings, because, you know, as events come back and people get more accustomed to traveling again and bringing people together for not only large industry trade shows, but like, let's create smaller micro events and fold in like a podcast recording component to it. I think that would be just a good route to take.
Yeah. And even like the other thought too is maybe you're a solopreneur, or you're you know, your company's 3 to 5. So it's just you know, you don't have 2-3 people flying with you. You can't do all this. No one's saying you can't, you know, you fly with your laptop, right? I assume you take your laptop everywhere you go. You can take your laptop, webcam, and a microphone. I mean, that can all be a carry-on that can stuff in a backpack. So yeah, maybe you can't, you know, these first couple events, you don't have enough budget to go out and interview all these people, but it doesn't mean you can't still record content. Go on the floor, learn some things. And then what if you just recorded like a journal each night? Like, today was the first day of the show and we checked out this and that. I was really impressed by this and this was great. I learned these things. What was that? That's going to take you 20 minutes at the end of the day. I think that could be a really cool option for people too, to do a few solo things at events to start. And then maybe next quarter you go to the next event. Oh, cool. I recorded 5 episodes. I can, you know, now I have the confidence to interview guests if that's what is holding you up, you know?
Yeah. Love it. Well, think that's a wrap.
Think we got it?
I think we got most of them. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing else I can think of right now other than like, how can you get rid of like this down here?
The exercising, the running around.
Running around. Do 1,000 sit-ups.
Do 1,000
sit-ups.
sit-ups.
Make you feel better.
No, that's great, man. I hope that helps people because I think it's not only like there's this, I don't want to say selfish reasons, but you do this and you're going to come home with content, good content that I think people will want to watch. It's relevant. If it's a big event, it's new. And most likely if you're interested in it, your audience is interested in it. On top of that, you get better at it. I just think it's one of those things. I would just start recording. If you don't want to do video, just start recording audio. I know you have a lot of clients that start just audio, but then as soon as they see what the video gets them, they're like, oh, we need to. But it doesn't mean they have to do that in day one, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they can always add that
Build
in
into it.
later. Yeah. So cool. Well, hopefully we see more, and maybe we'll see people doing podcasts at the next event we're at.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Thanks
Cool.
for having me on.
Yeah, dude, definitely. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for checking out On Camera, On Brand. This episode is produced by Motion, a podcast agency that helps B2B organizations create their own shows. If you enjoyed what you learned, check out more episodes at motionagency.io/oncameraonbrand.